Hey, homeschool family, it's Mrs. Chandler again, and today we're going to talk about goal setting. So, setting your goals is going to be one of the most important things that you do as a homeschooler because without a goal, you don't know what you're working towards. So, it's really important to have a goal in mind. And a lot of people think the goal is just to have them complete a math book or to learn biology, but those goals are a bit too vague. So when we're goal setting as African American homeschoolers, we need to get very focused and very specific with what it is we want to accomplish. Now, I will tell you this, our job as a parent, and let me make it personal. My job as a parent is to run a 25-year training camp for each of my children. At the end of training camp, if I can produce, a child that is able to take care of themselves, manage their lives and their homes, and basically replace me, then I feel like I have produced a champion. I often will say that parenthood is a 20 to life sentence, right? And sometimes you can get called back from your parole, you know? So you're never really free as a parent, nor should you want to be, because this is how we build legacy, is to keep our family units tightly connected. That way we can reestablish the generational order and wisdom that is needed to make sure knowledge gets passed down. And that all starts with, right now, you as the parent of your little family, your little nation, deciding what the goals are going to be for your family. Okay, that's how they're established. When I read my scriptures and I learn about, the father of religion, Abraham, I'll often ask people, does anybody know what Abraham's father's name was or his mother's name? Usually they don't because it's not important. What's important is that Abraham decided that he was going to go to a new place and establish some new goals, some new customs, and he was going to build a nation. And he had such an amazing plan that he ended up becoming the father of many religions that we see practiced today. And that's kind of the same mentality you have to have, and we have to have, that we're looking at our families as the start of a nation. So, not to freak you out, but goal setting is really important. We're going to talk about how to set goals in this video. So, the first thing that you're going to need to do is to know yourself. Okay? If you don't know who you are, and that means not just your identity, the things that you like and don't like, the things that you want and don't want, what's important to you and what's not important to you. It's not just about your personal identity. It's about your relationship, to other people and other things in the world. So in identifying who you are, you almost have to know, you know, what's important, who you're connected to, how those connections are valued and important. You have to define those things. You have to know what you believe. That's really important because without knowing what is acceptable or unacceptable to you, you might end up, choosing goals that really are not good goals for you personally to have. If you are a partnered person, and I kind of like to use that term better than married, but if you've partnered with someone, then you want to make sure that your goals and beliefs and identity is, comparative to theirs. You two can come together and work together and cooperate in a way to establish these new rules for your new nation. right? If you're not on the same page, it's going to make it more difficult, not impossible, but it will make it more difficult for you to identify the goals of your particular homeschool. And if you're wanting that homeschool to be something that, just like the public school system, we want our homeschool system to train our children to want to, encourage and repeat that system. So if we do this correctly, our children will be prepared to homeschool their children and so on down the line of our descendants. And that's what we have to think about today as we're setting goals and building our legacy. We have to think along the lines of what we put in place now will be for our descendants, not just for us, not just for our children, but for those who come well after us, making sure they have a blueprint to follow, to be able to recreate what we've done and then take it to a new level. So knowing yourself, knowing what you believe, and the way that you figure that out is ask yourself questions. In life, you have all these experiences, and as you experience things, you come to know who you are, right? You won't know how you feel about physical punishment until you're in a situation where you have to give it, or experience it for yourself. You won't know how you feel about finances or debt or any of it until you personally have an experience with that topic. And then, based off of your own personal reactions to that event, you'll know, oh, yeah, that's who I am. If you're the type of person who will be in a situation and see someone being mistreated, you won't know if you're the person who will say something to correct it or the person who will look the other way and walk away. You don't know that until you're in that situation. But you can't wait for those experiences to happen before you figure out who you are. So the next best thing to do is to just ask yourself the questions. What do I believe about dating? What do I believe about marriage? What do I believe about life and death? These are things that you're going to have to ask yourself. And then, I would say write it down, journal these things. But you can also just use a recording app on your phone and just kind of flow and see what comes out and then listen to it later. My husband and I, when we start getting together and brainstorming, we'll often just start recording on our phones and then because too many times we've learned that after the conversation's over, we're like, man, we should have been writing that down. So now we just kind of hit the record button and start talking and things will come out and then we can go back and listen to it later and go like, that was brilliant, if I do say so myself, you know. So for you, ask yourself the questions, ask your spouse the questions, make sure you're on the same level of understanding because that's going to be the foundation of building the goals of your nation, the rules, the bylaws, if you will, for your homeschool, which of course then is establishing your legacy. So once you finish recording those things or writing it down, you're going to make a list. And the list is really important, but it's not comprehensive. This is a list that's going to grow and develop over time. I don't want you to freak out and feel like, you have to today have a list of 300 things or 200 things that, are important for you as a goal for your homeschool. It's not that way. And then as you have children, you're going to find that some goals are set and are going to work for one child, but not another. Some goals will be good for you, but, not your spouse. It's one of those things where you just have to maintain the balance. The journey and the time that it's taking you to come together and build all of these things is what's important. So don't rush. Don't feel panicked. Everything is going to be revealed or discovered in its own good time, right? So take your time and be patient with yourself. And as you discover a new goal, then you write that down. And the list needs to be very specific. It can't be general at all. You need to know what age you feel it's okay for a child to get a job or to get a cell phone or to date, if you're even going to allow it. in our family, as a side note, we don't allow dating. We only encourage courtship, which is dating with the purpose of marriage. And our courtship rituals are pretty similar to those of our traditional ancestors. So for us, in setting that goal, we said, okay, well, we're going to teach our children that um, before they have children, they need to be partnered. And to us, it's not important that you file paperwork with the state and get a marriage license, but it is important that you make a commitment to each other and you have a contract and you make that contract before God, right? Um, and then our rituals or our goals for them involves arranging their meetings. So we are when they're ready to partner, we'll be the ones who find the person and kind of look at their families and see what's a good fit and then introduce them to our children. So our daughters are not at all concerned about finding a boyfriend or finding a husband because they know that mommy and daddy are always giving us good things. And when we're ready to find a partner, they will help us find a good thing, right? So, and that's just our custom. Your customs are going to be developed from these goals that you're listing. So you have to be very specific. But I mean, it's kind of overwhelming. So where do you start? And what we suggest is that you kind of take this according to categories. And I've listed some that I feel are important to begin with. So the first one, for example, and this is one that you kind of want to think of for when they're younger, and that's the category of self-care. Your children, like your goals for your children in learning how to care for themselves. And this could include things like how to, manage their hair, how to clean their body, how to brush their teeth, how to dress themselves. And then from there, going into how to, another category could be how to manage your home. How do we clean it? How do we maintain it? How do we fix things that are broken? Um, what age are you going to allow your children to help you with certain things? In our family, I just picked an age. And so I said, at the age of 10, our children needed to really start learning how to um, care for their own health. So things like making teas, mixing um, concoctions or decoctions or elixirs or whatever, how to bandage themselves. Like those are things that I decided were going to be important to teach at the age of 10. It doesn't have to be that age for you. Um, at the age of 11, they were all on laundry duty. At the age of 12, they were on kitchen duty. At the age of 13, they learned how to cook, and these are just my year establishments because I was pretty late. My sister's kids were doing their own laundry at 6 and 7 years old. They're capable. It's just her time frame was different. So, and we have a real habit of looking at somebody else's journey and then saying like, oh, I want to make that mine. I really want to warn you against doing that. When you hear a good idea or something that resonates in your spirit, it's fine to kind of take it and try to incorporate it into the way you do things. But I really warn you against just taking somebody else's discovery and then, just slapping it on your life like it's going to work exactly the same way for you as it does for them. I mean, you really have to investigate anything that you decide to set as a goal or a custom or a standard for your family. You have to make sure that it is going to be right for your family. Now, if your family's customs match mine and match somebody else's, then that's how we build a culture, right? Because now we're all believing the same things. We're all doing the same things in the same way. So it's nothing that's surprising. We all have that understanding. And that'll develop over time. Right now, I just want you to focus on getting your own house in order, right? So we've got self-care, home management, food. If your belief is that your family should not eat pork, then that is something important to make sure that you communicate with your children and explain to them why, because it goes against your customs and your beliefs. If you're a vegan person and you want your children to be vegan, that's really important to make sure that you communicate that with your children so that when they leave your home for whatever reasons, they maintain the standards on their own of their own free will and they don't violate your beliefs. What's going to happen if you're a vegan, but you don't stress the importance of it and establish it as a goal for your kids? Then the first time they go out and they're at a movie with a friend, they might get a hot dog. And then what are you going to do? You're going to be upset because they violated it, but have you actually put the time in to make sure you've communicated what the goals, what the standards, what the customs are for your tribe? You can't be mad then if you didn't put the time in. I mean, I guess you could, but it would be real wrong of you to be mad. And a lot of times we're upset with people that we really don't communicate well with. I'm about to preach right now, my gosh. We get upset with people, like I get upset with my husband because he didn't understand what I meant. And then I have to go back and check myself and say, did I really communicate that well? Did I establish that as an important goal to me? And does he know it? Like, was he really aware of it? Did he really hear and comprehend? You know, yeah, he knew that, but did he understand it? Did he understand the level of importance that it had to me? And then I have to kind of just swallow that because I can't be upset. That was on me. And when you're establishing your home, your family, your rules, you got to make sure that you're explicit, specific, you're actually communicating exactly what the goal is for your family and that everybody can be in agreement with it. Now, if you're vegan and your husband is not, well, first of all, that was probably a poor choice to choose a husband that was not vegan when you were vegan. That was probably not a good choice from the jump. But now that you're in there, you know, make that work. Make the rule for your family that we all get to choose the type of eating we're going to have. And I'm not going to impose that on anybody in the family. But I am going to make sure that the goal is that at all meals, we have something, and maybe two or three things that everyone could eat. You know what I mean? So that might be the goal for your family. So it's not just a hard, strict, narrow, everybody's vegan, there's no meat in my house, but it might be that I do, provide those things if they want it, then, I have restrictions, and anytime you have a restriction, just make sure everybody in the family is going to follow that restriction over time down the line. I mean, if we read our scriptures, we know what happens when people do not follow the restrictions over time. We know how messy that gets for the descendants. So we want to learn from that and make sure that we're just being very specific and very realistic with the things that we are requiring right now as goals. And we can say things like, when our children grow up, they'll establish their own goals. Well, yes, but we want them to maintain the same important goals. We don't want them to just be recreating the wheel every time. We want things to pass down that are really important. Okay, so just keep that in mind as you're making those decisions. You also want to consider the category of health and wellness. And this category carries like multiple subcategories. So you want to think about what it means or how you're going to teach health and wellness in your children's physical health. Is exercising important? Is taking a walk every night important? You want to think about their emotional and mental health and what does that mean? Is it okay that a family member can say, I just need some time, or and you can stop the discussion and actually take time to gather your thoughts and your feelings? Or are you the type of person who's going to say, no, we're going to stay and negotiate and work it out, and nobody leaves this table until we come to an agreement? These are things that you have to explore and define for yourselves. Spiritual health and well-being. Are you the kind of people who need to go to church every single day? or 2 or 3 times a week? Um, or are you the type of people who are going to worship at Bedside Baptist and just sleep in on a Sunday morning? Like, you've got to decide those things for yourself. I like to tell people, because I'm a preacher's kid, so I mean we lived in the church basically. Like, I would just pull my pillow up on the pew and sleep, because I was raised in the church. I cut my teeth on a church pew, right? So for me, as I got older, I thought, like, okay, well, that's just what we do. That's our custom. So I'm going to keep going. And then as I got older, I realized it was more important for me to worship at home with my children. And as I studied the, scriptures, I saw that, a lot of people didn't go to church but once a year. They would make that Mecca to the temple because it's so far away. And so they would actually have church more regularly in their homes. And so for me, that resonated. Like, I would much rather study scriptures and, worship and do things with my family in my home, and then go to church at set times of the year, which are important to us. Now, we can judge somebody else for doing or not doing something, or we can just focus on establishing it for ourselves and what works, what we need. Because I've found that, at times when there are people who work on Sundays, they beat themselves up when they cannot get to church. They feel terrible. They feel like they're going straight to hell because they cannot do what it is someone else has told them is mandatory to do. And that's so dangerous. It's so dangerous to just take somebody else's truth and make it your truth without truly understanding it for yourself. So this is the whole point of this video. It's to make sure that you guys get confident and you feel good about establishing the rules for your own home, for your family, for your descendants, whatever you feel is super important, to establish it as being important, and then to make sure you communicate and teach that to your children so that they can maintain it and carry it down the line. I recommend that you write all of these things down so that that could be like your family book, like make your own family Bible with the things that are important to you guys. And so that when, pass that down, let them read it and understand, okay, this is how we do things. That's how you establish your nation. You got to write it down. All right, let's see. So, another area that I want to touch on is communication. Got to make sure you teach your kids how to communicate in writing and orally, how to communicate verbally with people, how to express their thoughts and feelings, how to resolve conflicts, how to set and establish boundaries. And we'll talk more about that in another video. But these are all skills that, I've oftentimes seen kids who they'll want to do something, but they don't have the skills of compromise or negotiation. And so if they're playing with someone who has a stronger will, they're always going to end up being a follower. They're always going to end up doing what that other person wants them to do. And it's very dangerous for our children, for our Black children, to not have a spine, to not have the backbone and know how to establish themselves and their own needs in different situations. It's very dangerous not to teach them specifically how to do that, how to be okay being the one that doesn't want to go along with the crowd, right? So make sure you establish that in your goals and ask yourself questions. Okay, how would I want them to deal with this situation? What's important to us? And the language we use. I mean, is it okay if your children are cussing or using curse words or offensive words? Would that be something that's all right to you? Or is that something that they don't get to do until they hit a certain age? I've told our children that, they can use whatever language they want once they start paying a bill. I just kind of feel like that gives you the right to say something, you know? And I'm not saying that I used to never curse, and then I married my husband who's a sailor. And so I discovered that in his language, he doesn't understand it sometimes if I don't use, I have to throw a curse word in there every once in a while just for him to get it. It's unfortunate, but that's just the language he uses. And I had to understand that for me, I needed to communicate in that way to make sure he understood me. I was like, y'all will laugh, but I'm dead serious. Stop acting so haughty that you don't, get serious and be honest about these things. Like, you got to talk about these things and know what's okay. I don't want any boys calling my house. So even though my kids have cell phones, our rule is you don't get to give your number out to a person of the opposite sex, right? That's our rule. So that's just one of those things that we've established. Like, you're not able to communicate to them. When I was growing up, if a boy called our house phone, we'd had to put it on speaker, you know? So these are things that you just have to make sure that whatever it is important to you, you communicate that, you establish it as a rule and a goal for your own family. All right, let's see what else. Oh, that brings us to relationships, like I talked about it earlier, but you have to know when it's okay for you if your child is going out on a date, what that means. Or do they not date? Can they go out in groups? When are they allowed to sleep over at someone's house, and who is that someone? Because you might trust someone, but they might trust someone who's not trustworthy, right? And you don't know who is being exposed to your child when you send them to somebody else's house. In our home, we did not allow non-family to sleep over until our children were until they were 13 years old. And when girls come over to our house to sleep, we send our son to his cousin's house. We don't want him in the home when the girls are here. And likewise, when our sons come over to sleep over, or his friends come over, we'll send our daughters to, their cousin's house to sleep over, because we don't want that interaction, because we go to sleep and you don't know what's happening out there. So we just made that a rule for our families, for our own sanity, and to make sure that our girls understood the boundaries of relationship, right? So that's also an important thing to discuss with your parenting partner, to make sure y'all are on the same page when setting goals for your nation. Let's see, finances is a big area that you'll need to talk about. Who manages what? A lot of times families will think that, oh, the man makes money, he manages it. But in our home, my husband makes money and then we manage it together, and whatever money I make, we manage it together. Some people say, like, a man and a woman have to have their own separate accounts. If that's what your custom is, then that's what it is. I don't want to get in the habit of us judging each other and saying, why are you doing it that way? Well, they're doing it that way because that's what works for them. And whatever works for you, you will do it that way, and it will be just fine. Who knows? Your children might end up in a different custom, or they might bring your customs into their home, and that's all right. We spend too much time judging each other instead of just saying, I wonder if that would work for us. No, it won't work for us. But good for you, good that it works for you, and just keep it moving. So talk about your finances. When I started having children, I still worked. Um, Once I had two or three children, though, it was like, oh, I'm not making enough money to work outside the home. So it's just a matter of what what you two talk about and decide. Finances. So let's set that as a category, and then as you go, talk about it. Oh, what do you believe about that? Hopefully you're having these conversations before you actually partner with somebody, but even after the fact, have the conversations and come to some type of compromise as to what it's going to be, your family bylaws, right? Because you really should think of your family as a business. You're running a business, it needs bylaws. All right, let's see what else. Making and managing money and how you're doing that. Um, Most important here, making sure you're teaching your children or giving them the opportunity to set goals for themselves, right? In a homeschool environment, we want our children to be free thinkers. That means we don't want to tell them when to learn, what to learn, how to learn. Like, we really want to let them have an input and have an invested interest in establishing their own goals and making their own decisions. And we just want to kind of stand there and make sure they're not doing anything crazy. Sometimes they're going to have an experience that is a difficult one, and we want to be there to help support them through it. But some of our babies need to learn the hard way. We would love for them never to learn things the hard way. But if you think about who their mommy and daddy are, then you probably need to just accept the fact that they're going to have to learn some things the hard way, because you had to learn some things the hard way. I know I had to learn some things the hard way. That was the only way I was going to learn it. you know, and I mean the hard way. Okay. So just keep that in mind. That's okay. It's a part of their journey. You know, all we want is to make sure nobody ends up in jail. You know, we want to keep them out the system as much as possible. But, short of that, if they need to learn a hard lesson, then just be there to not catch them. You're going to have to fall sometimes. But just say, okay, pick yourself up, dust yourself off. I can help you get through it. I'm going to be here. But, it's like when the babies are little, they're going to fall down. Stop trying to catch them all the time. They're going to have to fall down. They're going to have to crawl before they walk, right? And they'll have to walk before they run. So just give them some time and let them experience life. That's how you teach them. That's their classroom. Life is their classroom. All right. And then finally, managing your timelines and your expectations. Whew, let's talk about it. So, when you have an expectation in your mind, and you could have verbalized it or not, it could just be an internal expectation based on what you learned from your own upbringing. So you have an internal expectation that you don't even know it's really there. You haven't communicated it to anybody. It hasn't been verbalized yet. But that expectation will start making you feel anxious whenever it is that you or your children or your husband don't perform according to the expectation. You have to identify it. You have to shine a light on it. It's like if my expectation is we all have dinner together as a family and then we don't, um, have I communicated that? Why is that an expectation? Why is it an expectation to have dinner at 6? If I want dinner as a family, but we're not getting home until 8 o'clock, is it okay to have dinner at 8:30? Is if I'm cooking at dinner, I cook dinner every day for y'all, and y'all not sitting at the table eating. Well, was that ever communicated? It's an internal expectation. Was that ever communicated out loud? Was that ever established as a rule for the family? You know, if you don't have understanding on the level of the king and queen of the house, whoever is running that business, you're going to find these conflicts come up. And the first thing you're going to have to do is check yourself. Did you communicate that? Did you communicate it efficiently and effectively? Do they get it? And if it's not working, you're going to have to go back to the negotiation table and figure out how we can make it work. If you can't make it work, that needs to be something it might need to be something that you're just saying like, okay, well, we're not going to get to eat together as a family. It could also be that you're saying, you know what? No activities after 7 p.m., period. We're going to eat together. Or you can have your activity, but we're going to all be in the house at 5 o'clock and we're going to eat supper together, period. If you keep having to fight with people to come together and do what it is you want, you're going to get exhausted and they're eventually going to win because you're going to get worn down. And eventually you're going to go, I just don't care anymore. And as soon as you say that, then it's bedlam. Everybody is doing whatever seems right in their own eyes, you know? So make sure that you're not exhausting yourself. You need to have the cooperation and the buy-in of everybody in the family to make sure that those expectations are actually, continued, not just in your home right now, but down your bloodline. Whatever is really important, fight for that. You don't need to fight every little fight. Whatever you think is important, you fight for. That's the first thing, managing your expectations. Internally, make sure you verbalize them and become external expectations. Explore them, evaluate them, and make sure they're beneficial. Then your timeline. A lot of times we have expectations about when things should happen. If you've ever said to yourself, well, they should get it by now, right? That is a timeline issue because you don't know when a person should or should not get something. If you ever said to yourself, man, I just feel like I'm procrastinating. I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something, but I'm not doing it yet. I know this personally. I've said these words to myself. That's a timeline issue. Who told you it was that timeline? Who said that you had to have this by the age of 30 or that by the age of 40? Who said that to you? You know, who established that as an expectation? Where did that come from? You know, You've got to explore those things so you can make sure that you are working on the perfect timeline. In our family, our prayers involve the statement, God, may it be done in your perfect will, not our permissive will. Because the Lord has given us stuff, like God has given us stuff ahead of time and allowed us to do it, even though it was not His time to do it. Just because, as parents, we'll give our kid a phone at 2 years old. They don't need one. They shouldn't have one. What do they need a phone for, at 2 years old? I didn't have a phone at 2 years old. So it's not a need. But where did that expectation come from? We give it to them and it's ahead of time. You know, the scripture says we can awaken things in our children prematurely when we do that. We can kind of put them in situations where they have to function at a level they're not prepared to function on. I know that was true for me. So it's really important for us to talk about these timelines more realistically, more honestly, and make sure that we are not imposing a timeline on ourselves, on our spouse, on our children that is not meant to be the actual timeline. Just relax and know that whatever it is God has for you to accomplish, it will be accomplished within His perfect timing. It's going to be okay. That's a hard thing to remember. So whenever you have those moments of doubt, just encourage yourself. It's going to be okay. Talk yourself back from the ledge and then enjoy the journey. Um, and then at the end of the day, just know that wherever it is you start and finish with your journey, your family is going to be able to pick it up and take it even further. As long as you give them the tools to be able to do that, they're going to be able to carry on where you left off. They're going to be able to establish what you've built. The scripture says, like, one will plant, one will water, and in the end, God will get the glory, right? So in your family, just make sure you understand that your journey today is actually a continuation of your parents and their parents and their parents. And look at where you are today. You're amazing. So imagine if you take that same mentality and know, okay, now I get to plant the next generation and make sure that they can take it and grow it into something bigger and better than where we are right now. And then you'll be great. You'll all be great. Y'all are already great. So thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope that it was helpful for you. I hope that it's going to help you kind of narrow your focus and start setting your goals, because we do want you to, set those goals over time and make sure that you're, just meditating, following your spirit, establishing goals that are just perfect for you. And you know what? Not fearing the journey, because your journey is your story, right? And I just pray that your journey is filled with knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. See you next time.